Lords of the Fallen is a very complicated game to review, and that is mainly due to its current redemption arc it's going on with its new 2.0 update. Now, on my playthrough, I personally enjoyed most of the game, however I don't think it would be fair to just ignore this game's complicated past and many issues that it still has. We should first mention that this game is actually the second game in the series, but for whatever reason it has the exact same name as the first game. And I mean the exact same. These guys couldn't even be bothered to throw the number 2 in there. Now, I would be completely fine with this naming convention if it was a full-on reboot, as apparently the original Lords of the Fallen was a really bad game. So it would make sense for this to be a full-on reboot of the series, so that they can have a chance to actually make it good. However, Lords of the Fallen 2023 is not a full-on reboot. It is a soft reboot, but it is also a continuation of the original, making it really confusing why they didn't just put a fucking 2 in the title, so it makes talking about these games a lot easier. A bit of a side tangent here, but I really hate this trend of naming a reboot of a franchise that also acts as a continuation, the exact same as the originals. The Call of Duty Modern Warfare games have done the same thing, and I'm getting really sick of having to specify the release year of the games, so that way people know which game I'm specifically talking about. Anyway, back to the Lords of the Fallen 2023. In 2022, when this game was initially announced, a lot of people seemed to scratch their heads in confusion as the first game in the series was not very good at all, and was slammed by both critics and gamers alike. But it had some pretty cool looking trailers, so most people were either cautiously optimistic at best, or due to the first game's bad reputation, had already made their minds up about not buying it. So, 2023 rolls around, and as most expect, the game's a sloppy pile of nard. People mainly complain about the bad movement and lock-on system, as well as it having the Dark Souls 2 issue of having way too many enemies and areas, and fairly underwhelming bosses. But the devs that made the game do something almost unfathomable and unheard of in the gaming industry. Instead of just leaving the game to rot, they decided to take on player feedback and release constant updates to fix and improve the game. Which leads us to the year of our Lord 2025, where they have updated the game enough to the point that they proudly announced their 2.0 update and claim most issues with the game are now fixed. So I guess technically in this video, I'm reviewing Lords of the Fallen 2 2. Like most other Souls-likes, the story in Lords of the Fallen is very vague and not directly told to you, so as usual I will try my best to explain with what little information the game tells me. For eons, a demon god known as Adir ruled over the world with a tyrannical iron fist until humanity overthrew him and exiled him to another realm. But his forces have returned to the world and are actively trying to free him from his prison by corrupting the 6 beacons that keep him there. It is your job to go and cleanse these beacons using an item known as the Umbral Lamp. This lamp also allows you to traverse the Umbral Realm, which is mainly used for gameplay reasons, which I'll talk about later. Personally, I think the story is pretty good. It's definitely not one of those stories that knocks your socks off or is genre defining in any way, but overall I enjoyed it. Unlike the story, the gameplay is very hit or miss for me. I suppose the best way to explain the core combat to people who are familiar with Souls-likes is that it's a mixture of Elden Ring, Bloodborne and Sekiro. What I mean by this is that you've obviously got the Elden Ring dodge rolling, but you also have the option to do more of a Bloodborne style dodge. There's also a mechanic in the game called Wither, which is somewhat similar to Bloodborne's health regen on a hit system. And on top of all that, there is a parrying and stance breaking mechanic that is almost identical to Sekiro's. All these mechanics are decent, but none of them are as good as what From Software has done with their games. For example, something as simple as the dodging can be a little bit clunky at times, especially if you're trying to dodge an attack that knocks you on your ass. Sometimes it'll look like you've dodged through it, but once the rolling animation finishes, your character will just decide to lay on the floor for a quick 2-second power nap. Another thing with the dodging is the fact that you have to double tap the dodge button to do a roll, where pressing it once makes you do a Bloodborne style dash. But every now and again I would forget that I needed to press the button twice to dodge roll because literally every other Souls-like I've played has conditioned me to only press the dodge button once, but that's more of a skill issue on my part. Another thing which makes the dodging feel clunky is that you can't really use it for positioning. For whatever reason, if you dodge behind an enemy as they're winding up an attack, expecting to get a couple of cheeky hits in on their cooldown, that enemy will do a full 180 just to hit you. Whereas in other Souls games, they might just turn a little bit, but they won't do a full 180. This makes using dodges for positioning purposes almost completely useless. There are some attacks that enemies do where repositioning like this is advantageous to you, but these attacks are usually on bosses and mini-bosses' dash attacks. Now this 180-degree turn thing enemies do isn't some unfair thing only they can do. Your character can also do this, and even when your character does this, it feels clunky on your end too. When it comes to the Sekiro-like parrying in this game, I don't have very many complaints, but that's mainly because I hardly ever used it. The reason I didn't use it is because dodging was just a much safer option in most cases, and normal attacks seem to do close to the same amount of stance damage as parrying does, so other than playing around with it in the very early game, I hardly touched it. Dodging from the very little I used it worked well enough. But like I said, if I'm going to choose between some very tight parry timings where I have a high chance of whiffing it and dying to a boss, and doing a shitty boss run back, or a nice forgiving dodge roll with iframes, I'm choosing the dodge roll. This game also has a minor issue with the character getting stuck on geometry, especially on stairs and hills. Never really messed me up during combat, but it did get me killed a couple of times during boss runbacks. Speaking of bosses, some of these bosses will become normal enemies literally one room away from where you fight them as the boss version. Now, other Souls games also do this, but they won't make the bosses a normal enemy until the late game. Like the Taurus Demon and Capra Demon from Dark Souls 1 for example. They're early game bosses, but you never see them again until the last third of the game. The reason they do this is to show how far you've come. But the issue with fighting an enemy as a boss, then putting them in the next room as a normal enemy with practically the same health and damage as the boss version, is that instead of turning this experience into a triumphant, look how far I've come moment, it makes some areas a hard, unforgiving slog to complete. Speaking of that look how far I've come moment, the same thing can also happen with just the normal enemies. For example, let's say in the early game there's an enemy who isn't super hard, but for a low level is a decent challenge and takes about 3 to 4 hits to kill on average. But you see the same enemy in the late game, now you can kill them in just 1 hit. This is another lesson most Souls games give you to inform you that yes, you are doing the right thing, and yes, you are improving. Whereas in Lords of the Fallen, enemies' health and damage seems to scale up almost equal to yours, meaning that the game doesn't give you this lesson, which can be very demoralizing to new players in this genre. It also makes some of the later areas an absolute slogfest to get through. Unlike Dark Souls 1, where leveling gives you that feeling of getting ahead of some of the enemies, Lords of the Fallen makes it feel like you never had the chance. Now when it comes to enemies and their placement in this game, I'd say it ranges from anywhere between decent to good, except for the last area in the game. This area feels like they just shoved all of the hardest enemies in the game into one area and called it a day. It was the only area I opted to run through instead of exploring. And the main reason I did this is because by now the game has taught me that exploring and leveling up won't get me that far ahead of the enemies. So when they throw an area that is full of the hardest enemies in the game, and I'm struggling to fight them, my best option is just to run past them all. You're all probably sick of hearing my belly aching by now, but there is still one major issue I had with this game: the performance. Now I actually played this game on 2 different computers. My first few hours I was playing on my gaming laptop, which is only a couple years old, and for a gaming laptop is pretty beefy. I mean, I played Red Dead 2 on this with max graphics and had no issues. With that being said, the laptop struggled to run this game on max graphics, but could still run smoothly with the game set to the high preset. Then I got my new PC built. Now I'm no expert on PC parts, but my friend who helped me build it said that this PC is about 40% stronger than my laptop was. My new PC could run the game on max graphics smoothly, but both computers had the same issue where in certain areas my frames would drop dramatically, forcing me to have to lower my graphics all the way down, and even after doing that it would still be pretty laggy, but somewhat playable. So yeah, that's my analysis on Lords of the Fallen. Like I said in the beginning, I don't necessarily think this is a bad game, but I do feel like it has the Dark Souls 2 issue of trying too much and being overly ambitious. I'm sure in the future there will be a game that combines Sekiro's, Bloodborne's and Elden Ring's combat flawlessly, but I don't think this is it. Anyway, that's it for today's video. If this gets a whopping 5 likes, I'll play the original Lords of the Fallen. Bye.